A long practicing environmental engineer, business owner, and consultant, and he brings a long time of experience. So he's quite the expert on these matters. So longer than the EPA, in fact.
Yeah, it's a couple of years.
Yeah, so if you'll give a short welcome to Bob, we'll get right up here and get into our presentation. Here, Bob, you're going to want this.
Yeah, a little white thing.
Yeah.
Before I get started, I thank you people for coming because most of you have heard this before. But this presentation that I'm giving is not something that I made up. This is a presentation that was given to myself and a bunch of other people. As most of you know, I'm a member of the advisory panel on hydraulic fracturing. And one of the groups that came to speak to us was the Office of Real Property Tax Services. And they presented this information to us. The only thing that I've done is personalize it by taking it to a town and actually bringing the information out. Anyway, this is me, and I've worked for a long time in the environmental field. I've worked on all kinds of different projects, nuclear stations, a few windmill projects, lots and lots of fossil fuel, probably over 100 hydropower stations, doing the environmental aspect of the situation. We have projects in over 32 states, all the way from Florida to Alaska. I've worked on states all over. I put this slide up here because I just want everybody to get the idea that natural gas drilling in New York State is not a new thing. Natural gas has been drilling, it's been going on in New York State since 1821. All of the red areas up here represent natural gas wells. The green is oil, and the black are storage fields. So we've had natural gas going on for a long time. There's currently over 13,000 active natural gas wells in New York State. I put this slide up here because the town that I picked to do my presentation on is the town of Conklin. And Conklin's kind of interesting because Conklin's right on the Pennsylvania border. And one of the things that Conklin has is, Conklin has a lot of natural gas wells very close by. And one of them is the Carty well, which is right there. The Carty well is just a little over 1 mile south of the New York-Pennsylvania border. And this right here is the New York-PA border. And although it shows up as a line on this aerial photography here, it is not actually something that you can find when you go out there. So the town of Conklin, if we talk about environmental impact, the town of Conklin is in an area where, yes, they have natural gas wells very close by, natural gas wells that have been hydraulically fractured, natural gas wells that are in production, and it's very close by. So they're not escaping any environmental impact, and I doubt if they actually see any. The other thing that's interesting on this particular, thank you, that's what I need. I actually need a bumper. On this also is a laser pipeline. Many of you have heard of laser pipeline. It actually goes right up through here, crosses the New York State border right here. This is the town of Kirkwood. This pipeline's not actually ever in the town of Kirkwood though. Where it crosses and goes on up into the town of Windsor. It's actually in the town of Windsor, which those of us who live in the town of Windsor are okay with. Put a few little slides in here on different things. This is actually the drilling unit as it would be in New York State, and the typical Marcellus drilling unit is 640 acres, 1 square mile, and it's usually laid out a half a mile wide and a couple of miles long. There'd be a drilling pad located someplace in the center. 2 wells, and I put this on 2 wells in year 1, and I'll explain why, and then I put 2 more wells in year 2, and 2 more wells in year 3. And the only reason I put this slide in is because most of you probably know this information already, but in New York State, the existing regulation, not a new regulation or something that we're actually contemplating, the existing regulation is that if you drill a gas well in New York State, a Marcellus gas well in New York State, you have to agree to drill all of the infill wells in that drilling unit within 3 years. So if they start drilling, they have to drill all of the wells that are going to be in that unit in 3 years. In this particular demonstration, I put 6 in. It could be 8 or 10, but 6 is a nice number to work with. That's different than the regulation in Pennsylvania. In Pennsylvania, you can actually hold a unit by production. You can't actually hold a unit in New York State by production. You actually have to agree when you start drilling a unit. You have to agree with the DEC, and you have to do it in writing, that you're gonna drill all the infill wells. So once somebody starts a drilling unit in New York State, under the existing regulations, they have to finish it. Now, we can argue whether or not that's good or bad, because it might be good for the particular people in that particular unit, but it's also difficult for a gas company. Let's say they come into a town that's got, I don't know, 30,000 acres that they need to drill up. If they have to drill all 6 wells on any individual pad in order to hold the stuff in production, they'll never finish the 30,000 acres in that short period of time that your lease is for. All right, I'm going to get right into the ad valorem tax, and the town I picked once again is the town of Conklin. The ad valorem tax is the way that New York State taxes gas wells. It operates very much like a property tax, although it is a production tax. Many states have severance taxes, and some states just have flat fees. New York State operates with an ad valorem tax, which means according to value. They tax you on the value of the gas that comes out of the ground, not when it's in the ground. It has to come out of the ground to be taxed. And for the assessment on that, think of the ad valorem tax, think of a natural gas well as a private residence. It's a good analogy. Think of it as a private residence, only it has a drilling pad, whereas your private residence is your house, and you have a 5-acre drilling pad, and the private residence is owned by you, where the drilling unit is actually owned or leased by the gas company. First thing that happens is, and the town doesn't have to worry about doing this because the Office of Real Property Tax Services does all of this work for you, and they actually provide your assessors with something. We'll get to it. The first thing we have to do is we have to actually address the economic unit. The economic unit is the gas well drilling site, the rights to the unextracted gas, all the equipment and fixtures on the site, pipelines, compressor stations, any storage buildings. All of the above, plus one well or a group of wells on that pad comprised of a single pad, is the unit of production. Where this might differ slightly is these two items right here. Pipelines and compressor stations do not have to belong to the developer of the gas pad. They could belong to another company, they could belong to a subsidiary. In the case of the pipeline that I showed you before, the laser pipeline was put in by a private company out of Pennsylvania. It has since been sold to Williams, and they provide the pipeline and the compressor stations where there are other people who are drilling the wells. All right, New York State, the Office of Real Property Tax Services, is responsible for developing these unit of production values. ORPS gathers information on the well data, the royalties, the gross income, expenses. Data is analyzed and normalized. Some people ask me, what's the analyze and normalize mean? It means they look at the data and any outliers they throw out, things that they think are just totally out of the picture, isn't put into the thing. In order for data to be included, they only take data from companies that produce 200,000 cubic feet of gas. It has to have that much gas production in order to be actually included. So real small people that just have a few, no, they don't use the information. But then after they do all this, the unit of production value is calculated for the new tax year and distributed to the local tax assessors throughout the state. Here's how they do it. We start off with the sale price. Let me back up. We start off with the sale price. From the sale price, we subtract the standard royalty and an overriding royalty. The standard royalty is the thing that, as landowners, we're always asking for. That's what we get. The overriding royalty might be to a company that came in and actually signed you up as on a lease. They might be getting 1/10%, 0.5%, or even 1% as an overriding royalty. Those things are subtracted from the sale price. That equals the net operating income, the number right there. From that is subtracted operating expenses, reserves, depreciation, dry hole, and depletion. These are expenses that the gas company gives. That equals your net cash flow. And that net cash flow is divided by a number called the discount rate. Now, this is a very confusing thing. The discount rate is 17.5 plus the average rate of the Federal Reserve taken monthly over the last 5 years. So it's a strange, you ask me, where's the 17.5 come from? That's a great question, because when we were given the presentation in our meeting, I asked that question, I raised my hand and said, where's the 17.5 come from? Well, the people that gave us the presentation at ORPS at the time, they didn't really know, but that's always the number that they use. And they said that it deals with risk and other things that the gas companies have to deal with. So they take that number and they divide by the discount rate. One of the things that we all know from what's been going on since 2008-9 is the Federal Reserve discount rate is very low. In fact, it's mostly been right down near zero. So even if you take the 17.5 and you add 0.1 or 0.2 or 0 to it, it still doesn't come out to a huge number anymore. And that's one of the things that's actually kept the taxable rate of natural gas fairly high. And that equals your unit of production value. Now you'd think that we'd be done now. What we're not done. We're not done. This is just the beginning for calculating the unit of production value that your tax assessor uses. What happens with the information that ORPS takes now is they take the average of the typical income, expense, and operating data for 5 consecutive calendar years. But to get that 5 consecutive calendar years, they go back 6 years and come forward 5. So the number that's going to be used for calculating property taxes, or the ad valorem tax, as we say, is going to be at least a year old, because they're going back 5 years and they're coming forward. I'm sorry, going back 6 years and they're coming forward 5. And that's the number that we're getting. I'll show you how it happens. So we go back to the 5 previous years. And in this particular case, you'll see we went back to 2008, where the production value for 2008 was $14.09. Gas was really expensive back then. 2009 dropped down to $3.67. 2010, $8.45, popped back up again. 2011, $9.06. Although we all know, sitting here, every one of us knows here that natural gas was $2 and something per 1,000 cubic feet. Well, the taxable number in New York State in 2009 was still $9.06. And in 2012, it's $4. You take that number and you add them all together and you divide by 5. And you get the unit of production value for the 2014 tax year, and it happens to be $7.97. So even though natural gas might be selling for $4 per 1,000 cubic feet, it's being taxed at $7.97 per 1,000 cubic feet. That's the unit of production value. Now what the heck happens with this thing? Well, it's pretty straightforward from here on out. For assessing the gas well, and this is for every town, this happens exactly, every town that has a gas well in it, it happens exactly the same. What you do is you take, the local assessor receives the unit of production value, $7.97. And then he computes the assessment using the following formula. The unit of production value times the production of the well, times township's equalization rate. And this is where the value of the well goes all over the place, with the township's equalization rate. And from that, you get the assessed value of the well. Now, what we did when we were doing this information is, in order to get the value of production out of a well, we took the DEC's numbers. This is right out of the SGEIS. This isn't numbers that we make up. And what the DEC estimates is that an average Marcellus gas well will produce in year 1 803 million cubic feet of gas. 803 million cubic feet of gas. And in year 2, it drops down to 354, and then 3 drops down. Pretty soon it just kind of flattens out and goes on for like 30 years like this. Now, one of the things that we've seen, and we know from following the stuff that's been going on just south of our border, is that most of the gas wells are producing more than this, and the decline curve isn't nearly as steep as this. It's actually stayed up much higher and then dropped off. But in fact, in order to do this and not have any arguments about our values, we chose to use the DEC's numbers. You'll see they're still pretty good. So now we're back to this again. What does the assessor do? Well, the assessor takes the unit of production value, $7.97. The number, we said 803 million cubic feet. So if you want to get that into thousands of cubic feet, which is a tax assessment, is based on thousands of cubic feet, you drop the last 3 zeros as well. So it's 803,000. times the equalization rate. In this particular case, the equalization rate is 66.5. It's changed last year, it was 68.5, down to 66.5. And that gives you the assessed value of the well. The assessed value of this well under this example is $4,255,940. That's exactly the same at this particular point as having a $4,255,000 building or property in your taxing district. That's exactly the same. There's no difference from here on out. No, none whatsoever. That's just like, and for a town like Conklin or any town, excuse me, for a town like Conklin or any town, the biggest thing is, that you can actually hope for is increasing your value of your town. Now, they've lost, I don't know, 250 houses in the couple of floods that we've had. So they've had a decrease in assessed value of their town. So this actually would add to the town and increase their assessed value. Now we're back to the drilling unit again. I just want to go through this quickly again. Remember, I said you have to drill the whole pad within 3 years. So we're going to drill the first 2 wells in year 1. Then we're going to drill the second 2 wells in year 2. And then in year 3, we're going to finish this up because we said we would when we started the drilling sequence in year 3. So now we got all 6 wells. So what we did now, and I had the help of my friend Dale to do this, is what we did now is we actually took the production and the tax rates in the town of Conklin, and we applied those to the assessed value of the well. So in year 2, now remember, we have, in year 1, what we did is we drilled 2 wells. We drilled two wells right here. And those 2 wells are producing that 803 million cubic feet. So we have pretty good tax stuff out of that. For county services, we get $94,000. For town general, we get 17. Highway, we get 19. For fire in the town, we get almost 11. For lighting, and we took 10 lighting districts and averaged them out here. We get 12,000 for the school. We get $345,000 in tax revenue from those 2 wells in year 1 in the town. So overall, it's $500,000 in tax revenue out of 2 gas wells on 1 pad in year 1. Then we moved to year 2. And in year 2, we drilled 2 more wells. So we have 2 wells producing at this rate over here, year 1 well, and we have 2 wells producing at year 2 wells. We didn't cheat by keeping them up at year 1. We actually dropped them down to the level where they're producing at year 2. So in year 2, with 4 wells on that pad, 2 new ones and 2 year-old ones, we'd get $135,000 in taxes for the county services, 24 for the town general, 27 for the highway, 15 for the fire, 17 for lighting, 498, almost $500,000 for the school, and now with the 4 wells on there, put on in 2 years, we're getting $720,000 per year in taxes coming to that town. Now remember, it goes to the town in the school district where the well is. And if you live in a neighboring town and you're in the same school district, your school taxes will be the same, but you won't get any benefit from the gas well on your town taxes and stuff, if you live in a neighboring town. In year 3, we put 2 new wells in. We have 2 1-year-old wells, and now we're going to have 2 2-year-old wells. So what we did is now we have all 6 wells, new ones, 1 and 2. So now we get $166,000 from county services, $30,000 from the town general, $34,000 from the highway, $19,000 for fire, $21,000 for lighting, $609,000 for the school, and we're up to $880,000. Now, truthfully, one of the things that's going to happen is now it's going to flatten out, and you're going to get it. It's going to drop off because now you got older wells producing, but it's going to continue to produce taxes out for the next 20 or 30 years. That 1 well pad. Now, if you had several well pads in your town, you just get the benefit of lots of these. Now, the town of Conklin, I'm sure, that lost all of their houses and everything, I'm sure that they would rather have this Cardi well, which is placed right here, which from my information, the people that I talked to, had an initial production of about 7 million cubic feet per day. I'm sure that they would actually rather have it right there than right here. Now, myself personally, I'd actually rather have it right there, but, right, Brad?
Here, here.
That would be a better spot for it, but I'm sure that they would rather have it, the town of Conklin would rather have it right up in their thing, because it would actually help their tax base a lot. They've lost their tax base. So, and finally, here's what we get out of the natural gas drilling. You not only get the taxes for that, but you get millions of local ad valorem taxes, thousands of jobs for New Yorkers, millions in lease bonuses, millions in royalties, millions in paid sales taxes of the county, millions in state income taxes, and tons of, remember, the people who get royalties, they're paying income taxes. So you might just as well figure that 50% of your royalties are going away. So they're paying royalties to the state. Millions donated to local charities and decades of prosperity for residents of the southern tier in New York State. So actually, this is the end of my presentation, and I'm ready to take questions on this.
Bob, you mentioned the fact that the wells had to be drilled within 3 years,
I did mention that.
right?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, but in today's technology, they're drilling wells between 18 and 24 days.
Correct.
So to complete a well pad, they can actually do 6 wells in less than a year.
Oh, yeah,
I just think
absolutely.
that's important.
Absolutely, it is. It is important. They can drill much faster, and we've gone on several well tours and stuff like that. And they can actually drill wells and complete them very fast. Now, in New York State, that'll be a situation where they might, right now, under the existing regulations, they'll have to deal with. Who knows what the regulations will be in the future, but in PA, they go in typically, and they have been, they've actually been drilling to hold units in production.
My question is, does Governor Cuomo know about this?
Absolutely. Absolutely, Governor Cuomo knows about it. Charlie?
Bob, you said that the rules are now 3 years, the pad has to be developed. What about, they're now talking about going into the layer maybe a little bit more superficial in between the wells? I mean, if you think of it as a tube, and you have 2 tubes, parallel arms, then you go up a little bit and you put another tube between them. If that's being done, how is that going to be, how is that going to work with the regulations?
It goes by, the regulation goes by formation, and the way that the rule reads right now is in shale formations, you have to drill all of your infill wells within 3 years. And there's a couple of different things you can do. We set the Marcellus pads up as 640 acres. They don't have, I mean, if you drill vertical wells, you could drill a vertical well and be all done with it in a 40-acre pad. I mean, there's a lot of things, but the rules are when you start a unit, whether it's a 40-acre unit with a vertical thing in it, or whether it's a 640-acre with horizontal wells in it, you have to finish it. Now, let me just say there's one other thing that you can do. You don't have to have a 640-acre pad. The regulations talks about up to 640 acres. If you choose to drill a single well, you can do that. You can drill a single horizontal well. And the single horizontal well, the only rules that you have to follow on that are you have to stay 330 feet away from the boundary with your well bore. So you could drill an 80-acre well pad and run it out, but you got to stay 330 feet from each side boundary, from the end and from the area where you enter the formation. I mean, so you could drill 1 or 2 if you lay the, but whatever you do, you have to complete what's in that unit.
So Bob, one thing that's come up a lot in Albany is they want to have a severance tax. They would rather have a severance tax. There isn't any talk about this ad valorem tax. It seems this definitely benefits the communities where the gas drilling is going to take place. How would the severance tax actually work?
Well, this is an interesting question, and one of the things that the landowners group, and this group, and all the individual landowners groups have been very firm about from day one is that we actually want to keep the ad valorem tax, because when people talk about environmental impact or sociological impact or noise impact or anything like that, the benefit of the ad valorem tax is that the tax money stays in the community where the activity is going on. That's a huge benefit. Now, if you weren't in an area that was going to have any gas production, you'd be rooting for a severance tax, because you'd actually be getting some benefit on the severance tax. But the ad valorem tax, like say if it took place in Otego County or Otsego County, what would happen would be the money would stay in that county. It stays there. It doesn't go anyplace. It doesn't get on a bus and go up to Albany and then get put on a barge and go down the Hudson River. It stays in that community, stays right there. And that's important. That's important for the people who are going to be dealing with any kind of environmental impact that's happening. It's good to have it stay in your community. Dennis?
Bob, the numbers you've given us, that you say you used are conservative.
They're conservative in the fact that we use the number for the production value that comes out of the gas well that was in the SGIS. And I think that, I mean, if you look at some of the production that Cabot's had recently in some of their wells down near Demington, I have an ex-employee who actually works for Cabot was telling me that most of the new wells that they've completed, their initial production is between 10 and 20 million cubic feet per day. Now, are we going to get that kind of production here? Probably not. We're not going to get that kind, because that area down around Dimick and Springville, that is like that's the sweet spot. That's the best wells in the world.
Are there any of your numbers that could be questioned by somebody who, well, I know they could be questioned, but a valid question for any of the basis for any of the numbers? And if not, what is the optimistic end of it? You said that Cabot produced a little better down the Dimick area than we could be expected to. What would be, these are, I'm sure, assuming our minimum numbers, what would happen if we went to the maximum number? What's the range that we're talking about?
Well, what you can talk about, let's say we're talking about something. The wells that we put on here, the 803 million cubic feet per year, that's 2.2 million cubic feet per day. That's a $2 million cubic foot per day well. And if we're talking about even the Cardi well, which is a little south of the border, you're talking about a well that's three times that big. So, I mean, I think that realistically, probably in this area, you could probably expect that 7 million cubic feet per day.
Does that multiplier make the tax realized by the town triple? Or
Yes,
is there-
yes, exactly. It's just like it's just the same as putting a bigger building in or a bigger house. You have more value, so it's taxed higher. It's taxed same rate, just more value. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, the reason that we use those numbers, Dennis, is because we didn't want to get into the argument that you're overestimating what it is and stuff like that. That's why we stayed with the DEC's projected numbers, not ours. I wouldn't use it.
Bob,
Yeah.
is there any comparison you can make along those lines to the wells that were drilled in western New York? I presume they get taxed in a similar manner.
Actually, they do, but most of the wells that were drilled in western New York are Medina wells, and many of those wells were and have been and still do produce 100,000 cubic feet per day, not millions of cubic feet per day. And so yes, they have ad valorem taxes, and they have towns that have thousands of wells in them out there. So even though there are lower producing wells out of the Medina formation, those people are still realizing significant tax implications from it.
Bob, I have a question. Out in Windsor, we have the compressor station and the laser pipeline. How does that play into this assessment, this scenario that you're presenting tonight?
It's interesting, in the town of Windsor, we do have the laser pipeline and the Dunbar compressor station. And one of the things that happened as a result of that is that 2 years ago, when they first went online and they were assessed, the pipeline is a 9.5 mile pipeline. The pipeline is assessed at $10 million. That's real property. That has nothing to do with production. That's real property. The pipeline's assessed at $10 million. The compressor station itself was assessed at, I believe, $28 million, the compressor station. So between the two, it's around $38 million. That adds real value to the town of Windsor's tax base. And in terms of what it did for all of our taxes, the town taxes, the school taxes, everything dropped the next year. In fact, our school taxes went down 6% the next year. And they're climbing back up now because the school's spending more money and this is figured into the tax base. But I mean, if we didn't have that increase in tax base, we'd be paying more taxes there. So and from our standpoint, it's a good thing.
Bob, lot of presentations on the internet from Tony Angraffi and Chip Northrup, saying that there's an iron curtain 5,000 feet down on the ground.
It's right at the state line. I showed you that line.
Yeah, it stops right there at the border. What do you have to say about that? Do you have any information on that?
Well, actually, what's happened is, I think it's kind of interesting because I've actually seen some of that presentation stuff too, and we know that probably the farther north you get, the closer you get to actually Marcellus, that you're going to expect less production. In fact, once you get 2,000 feet down or less, you can expect that they won't be drilling the Marcellus there. They'll probably be drilling the Utica if they drill anything. But no, it doesn't stop at the state line. Will it decrease as you go north? Sure. Will the production be better right at the state line than it is in, I don't know, Norwich? Probably. Yeah, probably. But what you really need to do to find that out, I mean, you got geologists talking about it. Some geologists say, yes, they're a lot more down in central PA, and you can expect some. But it's, I remember Terry Ingelder's, one of his earlier predictions was like, in the New York State section, something like 23 trillion cubic feet of gas available. So there's plenty here. You just need to actually, you won't know until you actually put wells in them.
Town supervisors and management, do they have access to this information?
Yeah, absolutely. I've probably given this same type of presentation to, I don't know, maybe 8 or 10 town meetings, and I don't know, dozens of Rotary clubs, and they do have access to this information. And the person who gets the information, it's kind of important, is the assessor, and he needs to know what to do with it. The big bonus in this particular thing, from my standpoint, because I happen to actually believe in education, I think the big bonus comes with the school district. As we all know, that in our area and all across New York State, is that school districts in the last couple of years have really been suffering from funding it. And since the highest amount of state support that they got was back in 2009, and then it just got cut right off, and now they're starting to climb back up, but they're still suffering from money. And throughout the entire area, what we've done is we've cut programs, we've cut funding, we've cut teachers, and I don't think that that's necessarily good for the young people.
So Bob, in the town of Binghamton and town of Conklin, there's approximately 32 square miles, and assuming that all of those units could actually be drilled, that'd be 32. I think the school budget's actually $33 million this last year. Looking at this and putting it together, if you multiplied them out, it looks like there might not be any school taxes for people to actually have to pay. This could be a benefit for everybody in the town, and even people that don't own property, because they would have, as you're talking about, a lot better teachers. They would be able to do a lot more in the schools, bring back some of the bands and different things that they've been having to cut. Could be really a big plus for everybody in the community.
Well, Dan, you're absolutely correct about that, is it would be a big plus for the community, and even people a lot of people say, I've got no skin in the game, I don't have any property, I have nothing, but they actually do have skin in the game, because this brings the tax money back into your town, back into your school district, so it actually helps everybody. And it doesn't make any difference whether you live on a 1 acre plot, you live on a 40 acre plot, or you live in an apartment someplace, it's good for your town.
Bob, you mentioned, I might have missed this, approximately 23 trillion cubic feet of gas in New York. That was just for the Marcellus?
Yeah, I think that's the number that Terry Ingelder came up with. I'm pretty sure it is. I read it recently again, and yeah. And in New York State, as you know, most of the gas is projected to be dry gas, which means it doesn't have any of the things like propane or anything in it.
Are there any other questions, folks? All right, any other questions, anybody? Got time for one more? No? I got a question for you, Bob. This is a lot of great information. If somebody wanted to present this in their town or to a civic group that they know of, or their church, or whatever, how would they go about getting this information, perhaps tailoring it to their community and presenting it?
One of the things that we did before, and some of the people in here actually took part in it, is that Dale and I put on a little seminar thing, and we actually trained a whole bunch of people, and some of the people have gone out and given several presentations themselves. So this presentation has gone to a lot of places. I mean, we were all the way up in Monroe County giving it, and far down to, what's the name of the town? Whoville?
Horton has a who?
Hortonville.
It's the only way to remember.
Exactly, Horton. Exactly. I mean, we've been all over the place with this presentation. And I'll tell you, the place that works, it works great when you give it to a town board. It's a great presentation to give to civic clubs of any type. They're always looking for speakers, and it's pretty straightforward. And after you go through it a couple of times, it's pretty easy to understand. The most difficult thing to understand in the whole thing, I think, is where do they get the discount rate that they actually divide by, because that's different. One of the things that we did here, Brad, where's that other, pop that other program?
Okay, I'll ask.
Drop it right in. Wait, drop it in. Go ahead.
Will wind farms and biomass and all these other forms of energy production be as financially beneficial?
Actually, the question you asked is kind of an interesting question, because they're all taxed also. Wind farms are taxed. I mean, they're taxed like real property. There are structures that are sitting there, so they're taxed like real property. I don't know about the biomass and stuff like that, because we're talking about fuels there as opposed to an actual structure. But there is a tax benefit to some of those things. Probably not as good as this, but because this is real tax and it's real quick.
Well, I think that if we had those statistics, it would be to our advantage, hopefully.
Yeah, it's good to know that stuff, and I actually don't know all of the answers to those.
But you have the ability to decipher it.
Oh, I'm not sure about that. Yeah, we put this in for you. These are some things that we put in here. I got this information from Rod Gould, who had given some presentations up there. And I want you to, when we do this, this is the town of Burlington, which is up near you someplace. And this is what, using their equalization rate, what the same number came out. Remember, we were 4,255. Well, in this particular place, that same gas law is 4,025. And the numbers are different. You get they're all go down through here. But keeping in mind that these numbers here, up in the top, all depend on how your individual town likes to do and stuff. And when you start looking at different towns, and you see this is 348, and this is, I'm sorry, 176, 255, and 311. A lot of the tax rates that you deal with when you go town by town change as the tax rates go down. So it's really hard to compare one town exactly to another. You can do it for the individual town, but it's hard to compare one town to another, because you might have a school district that has 4,000 children in it or 1,000 kids in it. So the rates are different. And what you do with your town and the size of your town and how much you have to do. So, but the way that it's computed is exactly the same. It's the unit of production value, 797 for this year, times the equalization rate. So you have to have that in there, times the production of that well, the 803 times the equalization rate, whatever it happens to be, is actually computed exactly the same. Here's Guilford, same production, 803,000 units. Their value on the well is 7,800,000. But it all has to do with the equalization rate and what happens with it when it actually becomes. You get down to the numbers, yeah, the numbers are a little different, but they're not like crazy different. But so, and you end up with different values. This is 277, 399, 488. Another, oh, I'm sorry, did I turn it off? How did I do that? Town of Otego, $8,600,000 for the same everything. It's the same everything, except for the change in the equalization rate. the numbers kind of flatten out, because if your equalization rate's higher and the value's higher, your tax rates are lower. And so they actually do it. So it's a town by town. Everybody gets the same thing. Now, if you have like in our town, the town that Brad and I live in Windsor, we have 3 different towns in our school district. We have Windsor, Kirkwood, and Colesville. They're all in our school district. And although their equalization rates are totally different, the amount that they end up paying in school taxes are exactly the same. You know, you might pay $12 a thousand in Windsor, and you might end up paying in Colesville $80 a thousand because of the difference in equalization rates. There's one example that I didn't put up here. When we gave this presentation to the town board in the town of Union, it was interesting because using the same numbers and everything, the value of the well based on their equalization rate was only $369,000. But their taxes are a lot higher, so that's all. The tax rate is higher. Equalization rates brings everything together. It makes it equal. That's what it's called, the equalization rate.
Okay, Bob.
Okay, Bob,
Are
we
you
got
telling me
2
I'm
more
done?
questions.
Then we're gonna have to wrap it up here.
Yeah, Bob, this ad valorem tax, is this coming just from residents paying into the town governments?
The ad valorem tax is actually paid by the developer of the well.
Okay, I guess so, well,
The-
now,
The person who's getting the royalties does not pay the ad valorem tax.
okay, so it does come from, so
But
it
you as
does,
the person who's paying getting paid the royalties, you're paying personal income tax.
so it does come from the gas company.
Right, exactly.
Well, what my question then, knowing that, is if you have a 5-year look back, and we just saw that the price of natural gas was up to $14 for, I think, 1,000 cubic feet, doesn't that present like a major disincentive for a gas company to want to come in New York to drill a well when you look back 5 years and seeing that huge spike in gas prices?
Well, it's interesting you say that, because one of the people who's on the advisory panel with me is Mark Boland, who's the vice president of Southwest Energy. And when they were talking about the ad valorem tax at that, he thought that the ad valorem tax was absolutely no problem at all for a gas company to come in here. The issues that were more important to him were the cost of production, the actual cost of putting the wells in and dealing with regulations. But he didn't see that as a problem. He didn't see, actually, this was fine. He didn't see that this is a problem, or did he see a severance tax as a problem?
All right, one more question.
I heard on the radio a couple of months ago that Susquehanna County reduced their taxes by 20%. How does that fit into our understanding of this thing?
Well, they didn't actually reduce the taxes by 20%. The taxes are probably the same. They just changed who was paying them. I mean, it's no less, it doesn't cost you any less to put your highways in, or to plow your roads, or to do the things that a county has to do. But when you increase your tax base by putting in a shopping center or a factory, or in this particular case, some natural gas wells, you actually spread it out. So when they say they reduce their taxes by, what'd you say, 20%?
That's what they said.
They reduce their taxes by 20%. They've reduced the average person's payment of taxes by 20%. They didn't make their actual taxes less. They're still collecting the same amount of money. They're just getting it from different sources. And they're probably getting it from all those sources that I just mentioned. They're probably getting it from the gas companies who are paying a substantial amount of taxes. And actually in Pennsylvania, you pay an impact fee. They have a thing called an impact fee, and I think it's like $50,000 per well, as opposed to either a severance tax or an ad valorem tax. They just have a flat fee per well. But you also have in Susquehanna County, you also have an increase in business. And there are more businesses operating down there, more people making money, more things coming into the county. So they're actually spreading out the money a little bit. That's how it works. I mean, it's, when your taxes for your town are real simple. They work out a budget, whatever that budget happens to be, and then they turn around and say, okay, what's our tax base? There's the budget, we divide it by the tax base, that's your rate. That's the same way the school districts do. Thank you.
All right, we're